Deep in the uncharted deserts of the American Southwest lies a secret that has remained hidden for millennia, a temple carved into living rock, guarded by ancient serpent deities known as the Nagas. When a lone cowboy, running from his past and searching for redemption, stumbles upon this sacred place, he unknowingly sets in motion a prophecy written in scales and stone thousands of years ago. The Naga Queen has been waiting, and according to the ancient texts, he is the chosen one, the only human who can bridge two worlds and prevent an apocalypse that threatens both. But what does it mean to be chosen by beings who predate human civilization? What price must he pay for a destiny he never asked for? This is the story of Jack Morrison, a man who rode into the desert seeking solitude and instead found himself at the center of a cosmic battle between darkness and light, between the world he knows and a realm of magic, danger, and impossible beauty that exists just beneath the surface of reality. His journey will test everything he believes about himself, about the world, and about what it truly means to be human. The sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked desert floor as Jack Morrison guided his horse through a canyon he'd never seen on any map. 3 days ago, he'd been running from the law, from the gang he'd betrayed, from the blood on his hands. The Arizona territory was vast enough to lose yourself in, or so he'd thought. But now, as his water ran low and the familiar landmarks disappeared behind walls of red stone, Jack began to wonder if he'd made a fatal mistake. His horse, a sturdy Maori named Dusty, whinnied nervously as they entered a narrow passage between towering cliff faces. Jack felt it too, a strange electricity in the air, a sensation like being watched by countless invisible eyes. The walls here were different from the natural formations they'd passed earlier. Too smooth, too precise. Patterns emerged in the stone-swirling designs that seemed almost deliberate, almost meaningful. "Easy, girl," Jack murmured, patting Dusty's neck, but the horse's instincts were sharper than his. She stopped abruptly, refusing to move forward despite Jack's gentle urging. That's when he saw it, a reflection of sunlight bouncing off something metallic or crystalline deeper in the canyon. Against his better judgment, against every survival instinct screaming at him to turn back, Jack dismounted and walked forward on foot. The passage opened into a hidden valley, impossible and perfect, like something out of a fever dream. A spring bubbled up from the ground, feeding a small oasis of green vegetation. But that wasn't what made Jack's breath catch in his throat. Rising from the valley floor, half buried in sand and time, stood a structure unlike anything he'd ever seen. Not Spanish, not Native American, not anything he could place in his understanding of the world. The temple, for it could only be called a temple, was carved from black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Massive serpent sculptures coiled around its entrance, their eyes set with gems that glinted red in the fading afternoon sun. Jack approached slowly, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip. The closer he got, the more details emerged from the stone. These weren't just decorative snakes. They were rendered with anatomical precision, every scale distinct, their expressions somehow both alien and intelligently aware. The entrance yawned before him like a mouth, and carved above it in a script he couldn't read were symbols that seemed to writhe and change when he looked at them directly. He should have left. Every reasonable part of his mind told him to mount Dusty and ride as far and fast as possible. But Jack Morrison hadn't made reasonable decisions in a long time. Besides, there was something else a pull, a magnetism he couldn't explain. It felt almost like recognition, as if some part of him that existed below conscious thought knew this place, had been searching for it all along. The interior was cool and dry, the air carrying a scent like sandalwood and copper. Jack's eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness, and he fumbled for matches in his pocket. When the small flame sparked to life, he nearly dropped it in shock. The walls were covered in mural scenes of serpentine beings interacting with humans, teaching them, guiding them. Cities rose and fell in the painted narrative. wars were fought. And everywhere, throughout every scene, was the image of a woman or something like a woman with scales that caught light like opals and eyes that held the wisdom of ages. Jack walked deeper, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. The floor was inlaid with precious metals, forming patterns that spiraled toward the center of the room, where a raised dais stood empty except for a single object, a staff carved from jade, topped with intertwined serpents forming a crown. Without thinking, operating on pure instinct, Jack reached out and grasped it. The world exploded into light and sound. The murals came alive, writhing off the walls. The serpent sculptures at the entrance uncoiled with the grinding sound of stone against stone. And beneath his feet, Jack felt the temple itself awakening, felt its awareness turning toward him like the gaze of something vast and ancient and impossibly powerful. A voice filled his mind, not heard through his ears but felt in his bones, resonating in every cell of his body. It spoke in a language he'd never learned but somehow understood. The chosen has come. The wheel turns. The prophecy begins. Jack tried to drop the staff, but his hands wouldn't obey. Energy poured from the jade into his body, burning through his veins like liquid fire. Images flooded his consciousness, memories that weren't his own. Knowledge from civilizations that had turned to dust millennia before the first pyramid rose in Egypt. He saw the Nagas in their prime, beings of immense power and wisdom who had walked the earth when humanity was young. He saw their withdrawal from the surface world, their retreat into hidden sanctuaries as a new age dawned. And he saw the prophecy, a human marked by loss and desperation, by violence and regret, who would stumble upon the last temple and become the bridge between worlds. When the visions finally released him, Jack collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. The staff clattered to the floor beside him, but the temple was no longer silent. All around him, in the shadows between the pillars, things moved, shapes that were serpentine and humanoid simultaneously, creatures of nightmare and beauty, whose scales reflected colors that had no names in human language. They emerged into the flickering light of his dropped match, dozens of them, and Jack realized with a cold certainty that he would never leave this place as the man who had entered it. The Nagas surrounded him in a circle, their movements fluid and hypnotic. Jack's hand went to his revolver, but before he could draw, one of the creatures moved with impossible speed, disarming him with a flick of its tail. The gun skittered across the stone floor, useless metal in a place where such weapons held no power. "Do not fear, chosen one," said a voice, this time audible, spoken in accented English that carried the weight of centuries. The speaker emerged from the circle, taller than the others, with scales that shifted from deep emerald to burnished gold, depending on the angle of light. Its face was disturbingly beautiful, humanoid enough to be recognizable, but alien enough to be unsettling. "We have waited so long for your arrival." The stars aligned as the prophecy foretold. "You touched the staff of Nagaraja with a heart full of darkness seeking light. You are the one." Jack stumbled to his feet, his back against the pillar, trapped but trying to maintain some dignity. "Lady, I don't know what you think I am, but I'm nobody's chosen anything. I'm just a cowboy who made some bad decisions and got lost in the desert. This is all a mistake." The Naga tilted her head in a gesture that was almost avian. "There are no mistakes in the workings of fate, human. I am Vasunaga, keeper of the temple and voice of the queen. And you," she gestured with a clawed hand that was somehow elegant despite its otherworldliness, "are Jack Morrison, born under the sign of the wounded serpent, marked by betrayal both given and received, carrying the weight of 3 deaths upon your soul." You matched the prophecy in every detail. The specificity made Jack's blood run cold. How could they know his name? How could they know about the 3 men he'd killed, the robbery gone wrong, the friend who'd tried to stop him, the marshal who'd gotten in his way? He'd told no one, had been running from those memories as much as from any posse. "The queen wishes to see you," Vasunaga continued. She will explain everything. But know this, you cannot leave this temple until the prophecy is fulfilled or rejected. To leave now would mean death, for you have drunk of our sacred air, touched our most holy artifact. Your very cells are changing, human. Can you not feel it? Jack realized with horror that he could feel it, a tingling sensation spreading through his body, a heightening of his senses. The dim temple interior seemed brighter. He could hear the breathing of every Naga in the chamber, could smell the mineral composition of the stone walls. His skin felt hypersensitive, aware of every current of air. What have you done to me? We have done nothing. The temple has recognized you. The transformation has begun. Whether it completes or destroys you depends on the choices you make in the days to come. Basunaga gestured, and two Nagas moved forward, flanking Jack. They didn't touch him, but their presence was clear. He would follow, or he would be made to follow. They led him deeper into the temple complex, down passages carved from living rock, past chambers filled with treasures that would have made any conquistador weep with envy. Gold and jewels were piled casually in corners, meaningless to beings who had existed before humans learned to covet such things. The murals continued along every wall, telling stories Jack was beginning to understand, a history of the world that bore no resemblance to anything he learned in his brief schooling. Finally, they emerged into a vast throne room. The ceiling soared overhead, lost in darkness despite the hundreds of luminescent crystals that lined the walls. At the far end, on a throne carved from a single massive opal that seemed to contain entire galaxies within its depths, sat the queen. She was magnificent and terrible, beautiful and alien in equal measure. Where the other Nagas were covered in scales, hers seemed to be made of pure light given form, shifting through colors that hurt to look at directly. Her lower body was that of a massive serpent, coiled beneath the throne, but her upper body was humanoid, 4 arms instead of 2, each hand holding a different sacred object. Her face was perfect in its symmetry, with high cheekbones and full lips, but her eyes were purely serpentine vertical slits that glowed with an inner fire. "Approach, Jack Morrison," she said, and her voice was like music and thunder combined. "Approach and learn your destiny." Jack walked forward on legs that felt disconnected from his body. The throne room stretched impossibly long, and he had the disturbing sensation that distance and space worked differently here, that he was walking through layers of reality itself. When he finally stood before the queen, she leaned forward, studying him with an intensity that made him feel transparent. "You are afraid," she observed. "Good. Fear is the beginning of wisdom. You are confused. Even better. Confusion opens the mind to new truths. And you are guilty, carrying the weight of your sins like stones in your pockets. Perfect. Only the guilty can truly understand redemption." She smiled, revealing teeth that were just slightly too sharp to be human. "I am Nagamaya, queen of the hidden realm, lost of the ancient bloodline, guardian of the gateway between worlds. And you, Jack Morrison, are going to save us all." "I'm not a hero," Jack said, finding his voice at last. "I'm a murderer and a thief. Whatever prophecy you think I'm part of, you've got the wrong man." Nagamaya laughed, a sound that echoed through the chamber and seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Oh, but that is precisely why you are the right man. Heroes are too certain, too sure of their righteousness. They cannot see the shades of gray, cannot understand the necessary compromises. We do not need a hero, Jack Morrison. We need a man who knows what it is to fall, who understands darkness intimately enough to navigate it without being consumed. We need someone who has everything to lose and therefore everything to fight for." She rose from her throne, her serpentine lower body uncoiling to reveal its full length, at least 20 feet of muscle and scale that moved with predatory grace. Jack forced himself not to step back as she approached him, her multiple hands reaching out to touch his face, his chest, his arms, examining him like a sculptor studying raw clay. "The barrier between our realm and yours grows thin," she said, her voice dropping to something almost intimate. "Dark forces stir in the depths, ancient enemies we imprisoned long ago. They seek to break free, to pour into your world and consume it. The last time they walked your earth, they nearly destroyed all life. Humans had not yet even learned to make fire. But the prophecy spoke of a bridge, a human who could walk between worlds, who could wield both our magic and your determination. Through you, we can strengthen the barriers. Through you, we can prevent the apocalypse to come. And what if I refuse?" Jack asked, though he already suspected the answer. The Queen's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the throne room dropped noticeably. "Then the transformation the temple has begun in you will continue unchecked until you are neither human nor Naga, but a twisted thing that belongs to neither world. You will go mad within days, violent within hours after that. And then we will be forced to end your suffering, and the world will fall into darkness because one stubborn cowboy could not see past his own guilt to the larger purpose." Jack felt the truth of her words in his changing body, felt the foreign energy coursing through him, seeking direction, seeking purpose. Without guidance, it would consume him from within. He was trapped as surely as if she'd locked him in chains. "What you need me to do?" he asked quietly. Queen Nagamaya smiled, and for just a moment, Jack saw something like compassion in those alien eyes. "First, you must survive the transformation. Then, you must learn our ways, our magic, our history. And finally, when the time comes, you must descend into the deep dark and face horrors that will make your worst nightmares seem like children as tales. But do not despair, Jack Morrison. You will not face this alone. I will guide you. My people will train you. And perhaps, in saving two worlds, you will find a way to save yourself." She extended one of her 4 hands, palm up, waiting. Jack stared at it for a long moment, understanding that this was the true choice, not whether to participate, but whether to do so willingly or as a prisoner. He thought of the 3 men he'd killed, of the darkness he'd been running from. Maybe this was his chance at redemption. Maybe this was justice, cosmic and inexplicable, catching up to him at last. He placed his hand in hers, and as her fingers closed around his, Jack Morrison felt his old life burning away like morning mist under the desert sun. The transformation nearly killed him. For 3 days and nights, Jack lay in a chamber deep within the temple, his body racked with fever and pain as human cells slowly adapted to contain Naga magic. The Naga and other healers attended him constantly, pouring strange elixirs down his throat, chanting in their ancient language, placing cool claws soaked in mineral water on his burning forehead. In his delirium, Jack saw visions, not just memories of his own life, but echoes of the temple's history. He witnessed the Naga's arrival on Earth, cosmic travelers from a realm where physics worked differently. He saw them take forms that could survive in this dimension, adapting serpent characteristics because snakes were among Earth's oldest survivors. He watched as they befriended early humans, teaching them agriculture, astronomy, mathematics gifts that would later be attributed to gods and myths. He saw the Great Betrayal, a faction of Nagas who believed humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable. These rebels had tried to exterminate humanity in its infancy, and the resulting civil war had nearly destroyed the planet. The rebels had been defeated but not destroyed, imprisoned in a pocket dimension that the Nagas called the Deep Dark. And he saw the prophecy's origin, the dying words of a seer who glimpsed a future where only a human-Naga hybrid could prevent the rebels' eventual return. When Jack finally woke on the 4th day, he was changed. His eyes, when he saw his reflection in a polished shield, now had faint vertical pupils that appeared in certain lights. His skin, though still human in appearance, had taken on a subtle iridescence. When he concentrated, he could feel the magic within him, a coiled energy like a second heartbeat, powerful and dangerous. "You survived," Queen Nagamaya said, entering his chamber with a grace that made even walking seem like a dance. "Most humans would have perished. Your resilience is impressive." "Didn't feel like I had much choice," Jack muttered, testing his limbs. He felt stronger than he'd ever been, more alive, but also fundamentally different in ways he couldn't quite articulate. "There's always a choice," the Queen replied, settling her serpentine body into a coil beside his bed. "Even if all choices lead to suffering, the one we select defines who we become. Now, your training begins. You have much to learn and little time to learn it. The barriers weaken with each passing day. We have perhaps 6 weeks before the first breach occurs." The training was brutal. The Naga became his primary instructor, teaching him to harness the magic that now flowed through his veins. It wasn't like anything Jack had imagined magic might be, no wands or spells, but rather a process of willing reality to bend, of finding the cracks in what seemed solid and fixed. He learned to see the world as the Nagas saw it, a tapestry of energy and intention, where consciousness itself was a force that could reshape matter. Physical training came from a warrior named Shorshna, a massive Naga with scales like burnished copper and scars that told stories of countless battles. He taught Jack to fight with weapons designed for those who possessed both human dexterity and serpentine power-curved blades that could channel magic, staffs that extended one's reach and will, and ultimately how to use his own transforming body as a weapon. But the hardest lessons came from the Queen herself, who taught him the history and philosophy of her people. Long into the night, while other Nagas slept in their coiled nests, she would sit with Jack and explain the nature of reality, the structure of dimensions, the true history of Earth that had been forgotten or deliberately hidden. She spoke of the deep dark with a mixture of fear and sadness, describing the rebels who had once been her friends, her family, before ideology had corrupted them. "Their leader is Kalamarsha," she said one evening, her voice heavy with old grief. "In your language, his name means dark death. He was my brother, Jack. We were hatched from the same clutch, learned our first magic from the same teachers. But he could never accept that humans had the right to exist alongside us. He saw your species as a virus, a contamination that would eventually destroy everything we built. When he and his followers tried to eradicate humanity, I was forced to lead the opposition. I was forced to imprison my own brother in eternal darkness." Jack saw actual tears slide down the Queen's scaled cheeks. He'd grown to respect her over the weeks of training, even to feel a strange affection for this alien monarch who carried the weight of millennia on her shoulders. "You did what you had to do," he said quietly, "to protect innocent lives. That takes courage, does it?" she asked, turning those unnerving eyes to him. "Or does it take cowardice? Perhaps if I had been braver, I would have found another way. Perhaps if I had loved him better, taught him better, he would never have turned to darkness." "These questions have haunted me for 10,000 years, Jack Morrison. And soon, I will face my brother again. The prophecy is clear: when the barriers fall, it will be Kalamarsha who leads the rebels through. It will be family against family once more." That night, as Jack lay in his chamber trying to sleep, he thought about family and loyalty, about the friend he'd killed during the robbery, the friend who'd tried to stop him, who'd seen what Jack was becoming and tried to save him. He'd put a bullet in that friend's chest for his trouble. How different was Jack from Kalamarsha, really? They both betrayed those they loved when ideology or greed demanded it. The answer came to him in the darkness. The difference wasn't in the betrayal itself, but in what came after. Kalamarsha had doubled down on his hatred, had let it consume him for millennia. Jack had the chance to choose differently, to let his guilt become growth instead of poison. He was dwelling on these thoughts when the first alarm sounded, a deep, resonant gong that echoed through every chamber of the temple. Jack bolted upright, already moving before his conscious mind caught up. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. He found the queen in the throne room, surrounded by her advisors, all of them agitated. The opal throne was glowing with an angry red light, pulsing like a warning beacon. "What's happening?" Jack demanded. Naga turned to him, and he saw fear in her expression for the first time since they'd met. "We were wrong about the timeline," she said. "The barriers aren't weakening gradually. Someone is actively attacking them from the other side. Calamarsha knows we have the Chosen. He's trying to breach before your training is complete, before you're ready to face him." As if to punctuate her words, the temple shook. Deep, fundamental tremor that felt like reality itself was cracking. Dust fell from the ancient ceiling. The luminescent crystals flickered. And from somewhere far below, from depths Jack hadn't known existed, came a sound like 1,000 voices screaming in rage and hunger. "How long do we have?" Jack asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Hours," the queen replied. "Perhaps less. The final barrier is failing. When it falls, the deep dark will empty into our realm, and from here, into your world. We must prepare for war, Jack Morrison." Ready or not, the prophecy begins tonight. Shurshna burst into the throne room, his copper scales dark with concern. "My queen, the lower passages are flooding with shadow. The temple's defenses are activating, but they were designed to keep things out, not keep things in. If the breach occurs here, then we take the fight to them," Naga interrupted. "We will not let them defile this sacred space. Gather the warriors, arm the defenders, and bring me the staff of Nagaraja. If my brother wants war, I will remind him why I was chosen to lead when we were young." She turned to Jack, and in her eyes he saw not a queen but a woman facing the unthinkable, the prospect of killing her own brother or dying at his hands. "Jack Morrison, you are not ready. Your training is incomplete, your power unstable. By all logic, I should keep you here, protected, until the battle is over. But the prophecy does not bend to logic. It says the chosen must face the darkness, must stand at the breach point, must be the one to hold the line. So I will ask you, not as a queen to her subject, but as one frightened being to another, will you descend with us into the deep dark? Will you risk everything for a world that has given you nothing but pain?" Jack thought of Dusty, his horse, probably still waiting in the canyon outside. He thought of the life he'd been living, running and hiding and hating himself. He thought of the 3 men he'd killed and the 1,000 small deaths of conscience he'd died since then. And he thought of the queen's tears when she spoke of her brother, of Vasunaga's patient teaching, of Shurshna's gruff encouragement. He thought of all the people in the world above who had no idea that their existence hung by a thread being held by a disgraced cowboy in a temple that shouldn't exist. "Let's go kill us some rebels," Jack said, and he was surprised to find he meant it. The descent into the deep dark began at the lowest level of the temple, in a chamber Jack had never been allowed to enter. The floor here was inscribed with containment symbols that glowed with a sickly green light, and at its center yawned a perfectly circular opening that seemed to lead not down but sideways into some other direction that human geometry couldn't properly describe. 24 Naga warriors had assembled, the finest fighters of a species that had been perfecting combat for millennia. They wore armor made from scales of their own ancestors, a tradition Jack found both disturbing and touching, and carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Shurshna was there, looking grim. Vasunaga had insisted on coming despite her role as a healer, not a warrior. And Queen Nagamaya stood at the edge of the breach, the staff of Nagaraja in one of her 4 hands, power radiating from her in visible waves. "Remember," she said, addressing her warriors, "those we face were once our brothers and sisters. They have been twisted by millennia of imprisonment, consumed by their own hatred. Show them mercy if you can, but do not hesitate if you cannot. The fate of 2 worlds outweighs our personal pain." She turned to Jack. "Stay close to me. Your power is raw but strong. If you feel the magic overwhelming you, Call my name. I will help you channel it." And Jack, she paused, something vulnerable flickering across her ancient features. "If I fall, you must take the staff. You must become the last defense. Promise me." "You're not going to fall," Jack said firmly. "Promise me anyway." "I promise." The queen nodded and stepped into the breach. Reality twisted around her, and she vanished, not falling but folding into that impossible direction. One by one, the warriors followed. Jack took a deep breath, felt the hybrid magic churning in his gut, and stepped forward. The sensation defied description. It was like being turned inside out and backwards through time simultaneously. Colors had sounds. Directions had flavors. His consciousness expanded to fill the universe and contracted to a single point of awareness in the same instant. And then, abruptly, it was over. He stood in the deep dark and immediately understood why it was called that. This wasn't absence of light. It was presence of darkness, a living shadow that pressed against the bubble of illumination the Nagas had created around themselves. The ground beneath his feet was solid but wrong, with a texture like frozen screams. The sky, if it could be called a sky, was a roiling mass of clouds that occasionally showed glimpses of things that shouldn't exist, geometries that hurt the mind to perceive. "Welcome to hell," Shushna muttered beside him. "Though even hell might be more pleasant than this forsaken place." The Naga warriors formed a protective circle, their weapons at the ready. Queen Nagamaya raised the staff, and its light pushed back the darkness, revealing more of their surroundings. They stood on a plain of sorts, broken by jagged formations that might have been rocks or might have been the calcified remains of creatures too alien to name. And in the distance, moving toward them with terrible purpose, came the army of the rebels. They had been Nagas once, that much was clear. But millennia of imprisonment in this reality-defying dimension had changed them. Their scales were no longer beautiful, but diseased, covered in pustules that oozed darkness. Their eyes burned with a feverish light that held no sanity. They moved wrong, with too many joints in their coils, with appendages that shouldn't exist. And at their head, larger than any Naga Jack had seen, came Cowboy. The resemblance to Nagamaya was unmistakable and terrible. He had her bearing, her grace, but all of it corrupted. Where she radiated order and purpose, he emanated chaos and hunger. His scales were not dark, but rather seemed to absorb all color from around them, creating a zone of visual nothing that hurt to look at. His forearms each held a weapon forged from crystallized darkness, and his voice, when he spoke, made the ground tremble. "Sister," he called out, and the word was both grieving and curse. "How kind of you to deliver yourself to me. And you brought the prophesied one, this pathetic human hybrid. Did you really think this mewling creature could stop us? Did you really believe your precious prophecy could overcome 10,000 years of righteous fury?" "Brother," Nagamaya replied, her voice steady despite the horror before her. "It's not too late. Release your hatred. Let me heal you. Let me bring you home." Kalamarsh's laugh was the sound of worlds dying. "Home? You imprisoned us in this nom-place, this absence of everything we loved, and you dare speak of home? We have become darkness itself, sister. We have transcended the weakness you cling to. And when we break into your world, we will remake it as it should have been, pure, unsullied by the human plague. Beginning with this one." He pointed at Jack, and the rebel army surged forward. The Naga warriors met them with practiced precision, and the plain erupted into battle. Magic collided with magic, creating explosions of light and shadow. Serpentine bodies coiled and struck. Weapons carved paths of destruction through flesh and scale. And the screams both of fury and agony were unbearable. Jack found himself in the midst of it, his training barely adequate for the chaos around him. A rebel lunged at him, its jaws unhinging impossibly wide, and he reacted on instinct, channeling magic through his hand and releasing it in a burst of pure force. The rebel flew backwards, slamming into its companions. But 3 more took its place. He fought desperately, wielding the blades Shorshna had taught him to use, using his half-human agility to dodge strikes that would have killed him. The magic inside him surged with each heartbeat, wild and powerful, and he struggled to control it. Twice it exploded out of him uncontrolled, creating shockwaves that knocked down friend and foe alike. Naga appeared beside him, her healing powers manifesting as shields that turned aside attacks at the last second. "Focus, Chosen," she shouted over the din. "The magic responds to will, not fear. Shape it with your intent." But how could he focus when everything was madness? He saw Shorshna take a terrible wound across his chest, saw him keep fighting despite the dark blood that poured from it. He saw Naga warriors fall, their life forces snuffed out by weapons that seemed to cut through reality itself. And through it all, he heard the Queen and her brother engaged in their own battle, a duel of such power and fury that the very fabric of the deep dark rippled and tore around them. Nagamaya wielded the staff of Nagaraja with all 4 hands, spinning it in patterns that created walls of light. Kalamarsha countered with his darkness weapons, each strike attempting to unmake existence itself. They were evenly matched 10,000 years apart, had not diminished their intimate knowledge of each other as fighting styles. Sister and brother, locked in a dance of death that had been postponed but never forgotten. "You were always so certain," Kalamarsha hissed as he pressed his attack. "So sure that you knew best. But look what your mercy created, a future where humans spread like a disease across the earth, poisoning everything they touch. You should have listened to me. You should have let me save us all." "I listen now, brother," Nagamaya replied, tears streaming down her face even as she fought. "I hear the pain beneath your words. I feel your anguish. But you are wrong. Humans are not a disease. They are young, chaotic, sometimes cruel, yes. But they are also capable of love, of growth, of choosing light over darkness. As this one proves." She gestured toward Jack, and Kalamarsha's attention turned to him fully for the first time. In that moment, with those eyes of absolute darkness fixed on him, Jack felt the full weight of the rebel leader's hatred. It was a palpable thing, a force that tried to crush his will, to convince him that his existence was an abomination, that he should cease to be. But something in Jack resisted. Maybe it was the weeks of training. Maybe it was the magic now part of his cells. Or maybe it was simply that Jack Morrison had spent so long hating himself that he'd become immune to the hatred of others. He'd already faced the darkest judgment possible, his own conscience, and survived. What was the hatred of an ancient serpent god compared to that? "I'm not nothing," Jack said, his voice clear despite the chaos around him. The magic inside him suddenly crystallized, no longer wild but focused. "I'm not a disease or an abomination. I'm a man who made terrible mistakes and got a chance at redemption. And I'm the one who's going to stop you." The magic exploded out of him, but this time it was controlled, a beam of pure light that struck Kalamarsha square in the chest. The rebel leader stumbled backwards, shock replacing fury in his expression. For just a moment, the darkness that surrounded him flickered, and Jack saw what lay beneath, a creature in agony, consumed by 10,000 years of isolation and rage. "Now, warriors!" Nagamaya shouted. "Drive them back!" The Naga forces rallied, pushing forward with renewed strength. The rebels began to give ground, their corrupted forms unable to withstand the combined assault. Kalamarsha roared in frustration, gathering his darkness for a final devastating attack that would obliterate everyone on the battlefield. But before he could release it, the ground beneath them cracked. The already unstable reality of the deep dark fractured further, and Jack realized with horror what was happening. The battle itself was tearing holes between dimensions. If they continued, they might not just defeat the rebels. They might destroy the barriers completely, letting the chaos of the deep dark flood into both the Naga realm and the human world. "We have to stop," he shouted. "We have to retreat. If we keep fighting here, we'll destroy everything." Queen Nagamaya's eyes met his across the battlefield, and in them he saw the terrible understanding. She knew he was right, but she also knew what it meant, leaving her brother here, imprisoned for another eternity, the war unresolved. Could she make that choice again? Could anyone? The queen made her decision in a heartbeat. "Fall back," she commanded, her voice magically amplified to reach every warrior. "Retreat to the breach. Defend the passage." The Naga warriors immediately began an organized withdrawal, fighting as they moved, protecting the wounded. But Kalamarsha would not let them go so easily. "You will not escape again," he roared, his voice filled with millennia of anguish. The rebel army surged forward, desperate to follow the retreating Nagas into the upper world. Jack found himself at the rear guard, alongside Shorshna and a handful of the strongest warriors. They fought with everything they had, holding the line while their companions retreated through the dimensional breach. The copper-scale warrior fought like a demon despite his wounds, his blade carving through rebel after rebel. But there were too many, and they were too desperate. "Go!" Shorshna shouted at Jack. "You're the chosen, you have to survive." "Not without you." Jack fired back, channeling magic through his hands to blast away 3 rebels who'd gotten too close. The power came easier now, flowing through him like a second nature. Fear and desperation had burned away his hesitation. The queen was the last to approach the breach point, still dueling her brother even as she retreated. Kalamarsha's attacks grew more frenzied, more reckless. "You abandoned me again," he screamed. "Always abandoning me. First to this prison, now denying me even the release of final battle." "I do not abandon you. I save you from yourself." Nagamaya's voice cracked with emotion. "Brother, please. Can you not see what this hatred has done to you? Look at yourself. Look at what you've become." For just an instant, Kalamarsha paused, his multiple eyes corrupted and burning, though they were showed something that might have been recognition, might have been regret. The darkness around him flickered again, and Jack caught a glimpse of what this being had once been. Noble, powerful, beautiful in the alien way of the Nagas. But the moment passed. The hatred reasserted itself, fueled by 10,000 years of festering rage. "I have become what I needed to become to survive your mercy," Kalamarsha hissed. "And now I will show you the price of your compassion." He raised all 4 arms, his weapons beginning to glow with an apocalyptic light. Jack realized with horror what the rebel leader intended. He was going to detonate his own life force, to create an explosion so massive it would shatter the barriers completely. Kalamarsha would die, but the deep dark would pour into reality like poison into a wound. Millions would perish in the first hours. Within days, both worlds would be consumed. "No!" Nagamaya screamed, understanding at the same moment Jack did. She lunged forward with the staff of Nagaraja, trying to disrupt her brother's spell, but she was too far away, weakened by the extended battle. Jack didn't think, didn't calculate odds or consider consequences. He simply moved, channeling every ounce of magic in his hybrid body, pushing himself beyond what should have been possible. Time seemed to slow as he crossed the distance between himself and Kalamarsha. He saw the queen's face, horror and understanding warring in her expression. He saw Vasunaga reaching toward him, screaming something he couldn't hear. He saw Shorshna's eyes widen in comprehension. And then Jack slammed into Kalamarsha, wrapping his arms around the massive Naga, even as the detonation spell reached its critical point. But instead of trying to stop it, Jack did something unexpected. He redirected it. Using every technique Vasunaga had taught him, every principle of magical theory the queen had drilled into him, he grabbed the apocalyptic energy and forced it inward, creating a contained implosion instead of an explosion. The world went white, then black, then every color simultaneously. Jack felt his body being torn apart at the molecular level and somehow held together by sheer will. He felt Kalmarsha's consciousness touch his own, not in words but in raw emotion and memory. For a fraction of a second they were one being, and Jack experienced everything: the rebel leader's love for his sister, his genuine belief that humans would destroy the world, his slow descent into madness during endless imprisonment, his desire not just to destroy, but to be understood, to have his pain acknowledged. And Kalmarsha, in turn, Jack felt the weight of 3 murders: the self-loathing, the desperate search for redemption, the discovery that meaning could be found in sacrifice. In that infinite moment of shared consciousness, something impossible happened. They understood each other completely. When the light faded, Jack and Kalmarsha lay intertwined on the fractured ground of the deep dark. The rebel leader's corrupted form was dissolving, the implosion having consumed most of his essence. But his face was clear again. The madness burned away by the magical conflagration, leaving only the being he had once been. "You ... Kalmarsha whispered, his voice barely audible. "You are what I feared, but not how I imagined. Human and Naga. Not corruption, but synthesis. Perhaps I was wrong ... Brother!" Nagamaya reached them, cradling Kalmarsha's dissolving form. The rebel army had stopped, frozen in shock at their leader's fall. "Brother, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I should have found another way. I should have..." "No," Kalmarsha interrupted, one clawed hand reaching up to touch his sister's face. "You did ... what was necessary. I see that now. This human showed me. Through his sacrifice, I felt what you tried to tell me. They are capable of growth, of choosing light, even from darkness." His eyes found Jack's. "Thank you, chosen one. You gave me what I needed most. Not victory, but understanding." The rebel leader's form dissolved completely, his essence scattering like luminescent dust across the dark plain. The rebel army, seeing their leader fall and their cause defeated, began to retreat into the depths of the deep dark. Without Kalmarsha's focused hatred to unite them, they were just lost creatures seeking shadows to hide in. Jack tried to stand and couldn't. His body had been ravaged by the contained detonation, his cells barely holding together. Blood both red and something iridescent that might have been Naga essence pooled beneath him. He could feel the magic that had sustained him draining away, his hybrid nature beginning to unmake itself. "Stay with me," Nagamaya commanded, her 4 hands moving over his body, trying to stem the damage. Mr. Naga appeared beside her, adding her healing magic, but Jack could see in their faces that it wasn't enough. The prophecy ... double key managed to whisper. "Did I fulfill it?" "Yes," the Queen said, tears streaming freely now. "You held the line. You prevented the apocalypse. You even gave my brother peace in his final moments. You are everything the prophecy promised and more, Jack Morrison. You are a hero." Jack would have laughed if he had the strength. Him, a hero? The man who'd murdered 3 people? But maybe that was the point. Maybe heroes weren't born pure and noble. Maybe they were just broken people who chose, at the critical moment, to be something better than they'd been before. "The staff ... double quotes," he said. "Give it to someone worthy ... You are worthy," Nagamaya said fiercely. "You are the worthiest soul I have encountered in 10,000 years, and you are not dying. Do you hear me? I forbid it. I am a queen, and you will obey." Despite everything, Jack smiled. Even facing death, the imperious nature of Nagamaya made him smile. "Sorry ... Your Majesty, but I don't think death takes orders ... Then we will see about that," the Queen replied. She raised the staff of Nagaraja high, and it blazed with a light that made the sun seem dim. "Warriors, healers, everyone who yet lives, lend me your strength. The chosen will not fall. Not today. Not after what he has sacrificed. One by one, the surviving Nagas placed their hands on their neighbors, creating a chain of connected consciousness. Their combined life force flowed through Nagamaya and into Jack, a river of ancient power and collective will. His wounds began to close. His cells began to stabilize. The magic within him, instead of tearing him apart, began to integrate properly, no longer human trying to contain Naga power, but something genuinely new, a true synthesis of both species. Jack gasped as strength returned to his limbs. The pain receded, replaced by a sensation of wholeness he'd never experienced before. When he finally stood, supported by Vasunaga and Shorshna, he felt transformed in a way that went beyond the physical. Something fundamental had shifted in his soul. "Welcome back, Chosen," Shorshna said with a grin that showed too many teeth. "Though you gave us quite a scare. Brave, yes, but also incredibly stupid. I like that in a warrior." "We need to leave this place," Vasunaga urged, eyeing the darkness that pressed at the edges of their light. The deep dark senses weakness. More things will come, drawn by the battle's residue. They retreated through the breach in an organized withdrawal, the warriors forming a protective escort. As Jack took one last look at the realm of shadow and madness, he saw the scattered essence of Kalamartia beginning to coalesce again, not into a single form, but into hundreds of small lights, like fireflies in the darkness. Perhaps, in whatever passed for an afterlife in this dimension, the rebel leader had finally found peace. The return to the temple was like being born again. The orderly reality of the upper realm felt almost jarring after the chaos of the deep. Dark, but it was beautiful too, the ancient stone, the soft glow of crystals, the sense of purpose and history that permeated every chamber. The surviving warriors were tended to by healers. The dead were honored with ceremonies that made Jack weep despite not fully understanding the words. He had fought beside these beings for only hours, but the bond forged in battle ran deeper than time. 3 days passed in recovery and ritual. Jack slept for most of the first day, his body needing rest to fully integrate the changes that had occurred. When he finally woke, he found the Queen sitting beside his bed, watching him with an expression that was almost maternal. "How do you feel?" she asked softly. Jack considered the question seriously. "Different," he admitted. "Not human anymore. Not really. But not Naga either. Something else. Something between. The prophecy called you the bridge," Nagamaya reminded him. "Not one side or the other, but the connection itself. And that, Jack Morrison, is precisely what we need. The barriers are stable again, reinforced by the magical energy released during the battle. But they will not last forever. In time, perhaps centuries, perhaps millennia, they will weaken again. And when they do, we will need someone who can walk between worlds to strengthen them once more." "Me?" Jack asked, though he already knew the answer. "If you are willing, you have fulfilled your part of the prophecy, defeated the threat, saved countless lives. You owe us nothing more. If you wish, I can use the staff to transform you back to fully human, return you to your world with your memories intact, but your hybrid nature removed. You could go back to your life." Jack thought about that life running from the law, haunted by guilt, alone except for a horse and his regrets. Then he thought about the past weeks, learning magic from Vasunaga, sparring with Shorshna, discussing philosophy with the Queen late into the night. He thought about having a purpose larger than himself, about being part of something ancient and important. "What would I do?" he asked, "if I stayed?" "I'm not exactly qualified to be a temple guard or a scholar," Nagamaya smiled. "You would be the guardian of the threshold. You would live between our world and yours, watching over the barriers, reporting any weaknesses. You would be our ambassador to humanity, helping to guide your species toward wisdom rather than destruction, not through control, but through subtle influence. You would teach us about your people, and teach your people, when the time is right, about us. It is a lonely path, Jack Morrison. You would belong fully to neither world, but you would be vital to both. Jack stood and walked to the window of his chamber, looking out over the hidden valley. Somewhere beyond those canyon walls, Dusty was probably still waiting, loyal to the end. The thought made his heart ache. But going back to that life felt like trying to wear clothes he'd outgrown. "I'll do it," he said. "I'll be your guardian. On one condition. Name it. I get to visit the surface. Keep a connection to humanity. I won't be much good as a bridge if I forget what it means to be human." The Queen rose and placed one of her 4 hands on his shoulder. "Agreed. And Jack, thank you for everything. You have given my people hope, given me peace regarding my brother, and proven that the prophecy was more than just ancient words. You have proven that transformation is possible, not just of body, but of soul." That evening, there was a ceremony. The surviving Nagas gathered in the throne room, and Jack knelt before the Queen as she touched his head with the staff of Nagaraja. Words were spoken in the ancient language, words of binding and blessing. When she finished, Jack felt a new connection settle over him, not a chain, but a thread linking him to the temple, to the barriers, to the responsibility he'd accepted. He was no longer Jack Morrison, outlaw and murderer. He was the guardian of the threshold, the bridge between worlds, the chosen of the prophecy. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. 6 months passed like water through fingers. Jack settled into his new role, learning to navigate the strange existence of someone who belonged nowhere completely, but was welcomed everywhere partially. He spent weeks in the temple, studying with Vasunaga and training with Shorshna, deepening his understanding of Naga magic and culture. Then he would return to the surface, riding Dusty through the Arizona territory, watching human civilization expand and evolve. His hybrid nature gave him advantages in both worlds. Among humans, he appeared normal until one looked closely. Then they might notice the slight iridescence of his skin in certain lights, the occasional vertical slit to his pupils when he was emotional or using magic. Most people simply thought he had unusual features and moved on. Those few who suspected something more found their memories gently clouded by the same magic that concealed the temple from ordinary perception. Jack used his position carefully, intervening in small ways that might prevent larger catastrophes. A word of warning to a prospector kept him from dynamiting a site that would have collapsed the canyon system above the temple. A suggestion to a territorial governor helped establish a nature preserve that would protect the hidden valley for generations. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention, just gentle nudges toward better outcomes. But it was the barrier maintenance that formed the core of his purpose. Once a month, Jack descended into the deep dark, alone now, to inspect the dimensional walls and repair any weaknesses. It was dangerous work. The realm had not become less hostile with Kalamarsh's death, but Jack found a strange peace in it. In that place of shadow and chaos, he could be fully himself, neither hiding his hybrid nature nor explaining it. Sometimes, during these inspections, he thought he caught glimpses of lights in the distance, the scattered essence of the rebel leader, perhaps still conscious on some level, perhaps finally at rest. Jack always nodded respectfully when he saw them, a gesture of acknowledgement between two beings who had understood each other completely, if only for an instant. Life in the temple brought its own rewards. Vasunaga became not just a teacher, but a true friend, someone who appreciated both Jack's human humor and his growing Naga wisdom. Shorshna appointed himself Jack's perpetual training partner, delighting in sparring matches that left both of them bruised and laughing. And the Queen Nagamaya remained a constant presence, part ruler, part mentor, part something Jack couldn't quite name but valued deeply. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset from one of the temple's high terraces, she asked him a question that had clearly been on her mind for some time. "Do you ever regret it?" The choice you made? The life you gave up? Jack considered carefully before answering. I regret the 3 men I killed. I'll regret that until the day I die, however far away that is now. But do I regret becoming this? He gestured to himself, to the hybrid nature that let him exist in multiple realities. No, that old life was killing me slower, but just as surely as any bullet. At least now, the darkness I carry serves a purpose. The guilt I feel fuels my determination to protect others from making my mistakes. That is wisdom, Naga said softly. Though I wish you could forgive yourself as I have forgiven you. As my brother, in his final moments, forgave you. Maybe someday, Jack replied. But not yet. The guilt keeps me honest, keeps me humble. The moment I forgive myself completely is the moment I might become dangerous again. The Queen saw his tail coiled around him in what he learned was a gesture of affection among her people. Then carry it, but do not let it crush you. Remember that you are more than your worst moments, Jack Morrison. You are also your best ones. You are the man who threw himself at a detonating magical bomb to save 2 worlds. That man deserves some compassion, even from himself. Seasons turned. Jack's reputation among the Nagas grew from the Chosen of Prophecy to simply Guardian Jack, a title given with respect and warmth. He helped mediate disputes, offered perspectives that combined human practicality with Naga wisdom, and continued his vital work maintaining the barriers. The temple became his true home, the Nagas his real family. But he never forgot his human origins. Once every few months, Jack would ride into a frontier town, sit in a saloon, and just listen to people. Their concerns, their dreams, their fears. He absorbed it all, keeping his connection to humanity alive and vibrant. Sometimes he'd help in small ways, breaking up a fight before it turned deadly, talking a desperate man out of a robbery, leaving anonymous donations for families in need. On one such visit, nearly a year after his transformation, Jack encountered a young deputy tracking an outlaw through the territory. The deputy was eager, idealistic, sure of his righteous cause. He reminded Jack painfully of the marshal he'd killed, that same certainty, that same blind confidence in his own moral authority. "You're hunting the Morrison gang?" Jack asked casually, having overheard the deputy talking. "What's left of them?" the deputy replied. "Their leader, Jack Morrison, disappeared almost a year ago. Vanished without a trace after that bank job in Tombstone. Most think he's dead, but I've been following leads. Someone needs to bring him to justice." Jack felt a chill. He'd thought that part of his life was behind him, that everyone had assumed he died in the desert. "And what will you do if you find him?" he asked carefully. "Bring him in for trial," the deputy said firmly. "Everyone deserves their day in court, even murderers. That's what separates us from them. We believe in justice, not revenge." The words hit Jack harder than any physical blow. This young man, so full of principle and faith in the system, was exactly what Jack had destroyed when he killed that marshal. And here was another one, walking the same path, possibly toward the same fate if he wasn't careful. "Can I give you some advice?" Jack said quietly. "When you're chasing bad men, remember that most of them didn't start out bad. They made choices, usually small ones at first, that led them down dark roads. And sometimes the worst thing you can do is catch them, because justice doesn't always lead to change, and punishment doesn't always lead to redemption. Sometimes the best thing is to let a man die in the desert and hope that maybe, somewhere, he found a way to become someone better." The deputy frowned, clearly puzzled by this strange cowboy's philosophy. "That's not how the law works, friend." "No," Jack agreed. "It's not. But maybe it's how life works." He tipped his hat and rode away, leaving the deputy staring after him in confusion. That night, back in the temple, Jack told Naga about the encounter. She listened thoughtfully, her luminescent scales shifting colors with her mood. "Do you want to clear your name?" she asked. With my magic, we could create evidence of your death. Close that chapter of your life completely. No, Jack said after a moment. Let them keep looking. Let Jack Morrison the outlaw remain a mystery, a cautionary tale, a ghost that haunts the Arizona territory. It's a reminder to me and maybe to others that our choices matter, that we can't simply erase our pasts even if we transform our futures. I'm the guardian now, but I was a murderer first. Both truths exist simultaneously. You have become very wise for a human, Naga teased gently. And you've become very sentimental for a 10,000-year-old Serpent Queen. Jack shot back with a grin. Their laughter echoed through the ancient halls, a sound of genuine joy that those stones had rarely heard during their long existence. More time passed. Jack's transformation continued in subtle ways, not physically, but spiritually and mentally. He began to perceive reality the way the Nagas did, seeing the connections between things, understanding how actions rippled across time and space. His magic grew more refined, more controlled. He learned to shift his appearance slightly, making himself more human or more Naga depending on the situation. But the most profound change was internal. The guilt that had defined him for so long didn't disappear. That would have been dishonest, a betrayal of the 3 lives he'd taken. Instead, it transmuted into something else, a deep commitment to preventing others from walking the path he walked. Every life he saved, every disaster he prevented, every gentle intervention that kept someone from making a terrible choice, these became his true penance, more meaningful than any prison sentence could have been. On the first anniversary of his transformation, the Nagas held a celebration. It was a small affair by their standards, but it moved Jack deeply. The Naga presented him with a set of armor crafted from shed scales donated by dozens of Nagas, a gift that signified his complete acceptance into their society. Shurshna challenged him to a sparring match that Jack actually won, much to everyone's surprised delight. And Queen Nagamaya gave him something unexpected, a small crystal that contained a recording of Kalamarsha's final moments, preserved in magical amber. So you never forget, she explained, that even the darkest soul can find light at the end. That redemption is always possible, even in the final instant. My brother was wrong about many things, but he was right that you, Jack Morrison, represent hope that humans and Nagas can coexist. Hope that mistakes don't define destiny. Hope that love and sacrifice can overcome hatred and fear. Jack held the crystal carefully, seeing within it the rebel leader's peaceful expression as he dissolved into light. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything. For giving a worthless outlaw a chance to be something more." "You were never worthless," Nagamaya corrected gently. "You were lost. There's a difference. And now you are found." That night, Jack climbed to the highest point of the temple and looked out over the hidden valley. The moon was full, painting everything in silver. Somewhere out there in the human world, the legend of Jack Morrison the outlaw continued to grow. Some said he'd been eaten by coyotes, others that he'd fled to Mexico, still others that a mysterious stranger matching his description had been seen helping people in trouble throughout the territory. Let them speculate, Jack thought. Let the mystery remain. The truth was stranger and more beautiful than any legend could capture. A murderer transformed into a guardian, a human reshaped into a bridge between species, a broken man who found wholeness in the service of something greater than himself. He descended back into the temple as dawn approached, ready to continue his work. The barriers needed checking. Naga wanted to teach him a new healing technique, and Shurshna had promised a challenging training session. It was a life of purpose and meaning, earned through sacrifice and maintained through constant effort. And if sometimes, in the quiet moments, Jack Morrison thought about the 3 men he'd killed and wondered if they would have forgiven him, he reminded himself of what the Queen had taught him. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about building a future worthy of those who've been hurt by it. Every life he saved was an apology written in action. Every dawn he witnessed was a gift he didn't take for granted. The cowboy, who had stumbled into a hidden temple seeking only water and escape, had found something far more valuable. A reason to live that was greater than his reasons to die. And in the end, isn't that what salvation really means?